So this is part 2 to the Simplified Object project. What happened between the first video and this video is I took the liberty of putting in the details of the waffle cone. So just to briefly go over what it was that I did, I also did the details of the fingernails. I also added that little drip of the ice cream onto that finger because I think it gives a nice little added character to the scene and the story being told as a whole. It's kind of fun to see the melting ice cream drip upon the person's finger. So I wanted to just break down for you what it was that I did. It is pretty straightforward as a checkered pattern, but instead of doing what just our brain thinks of as a checkered pattern, I wanted to make sure that every so often I'm constantly looking back at the source to make sure I'm getting those angles right. And it's not super perfect in the sense that, the angle might be slightly off. But all of these quadrants of the waffle cone texture are all generally about the same size. They're all in line with each other. I did do all of my lateral lines first. I just made those angles as close as possible, even with some slight variations. I just made them all evenly spaced, made sure that the widths were consistent for all of these raised parts of the waffle texture. And then making sure that all of the squares looked roughly about the same size because that's what's going on there in the source. And then after I did the lateral ones, I then did the ones that are vertical, not straight up and down, but the ones that are going from the top to the bottom, these longer ones here. Something that I discovered, remember, drawing is a form of thinking. As I'm looking at this, you have to understand what's going on. So with this waffle cone, a waffle cone is made by this waffle pattern on this, piece of dough, if you want to call it that, for, the ice cream cone dough in a waffle maker, and it's thin, and then you roll it up. It's a cone that you roll. So there's an actual, I didn't notice this at first, but, oops, where's my pencil? There is, if you look at the source closely, and this is on our Canvas page for the course, if you wanted to look more closely in person at this source, but you can follow the edge right there. I don't know if you can see it maybe a little bit better if I tilt this because of the glare of the camera. But making sure that you're aware of what's going on. What actually tipped me off to that was I wasn't sure why the lines here weren't lining up perfect to the lines beyond there. So upon further investigation, I discovered, this is that line where the waffle cone is wrapping around itself, and it's overlapping right there. So I do have that prominently mentioned with mark making. This is where you mention things. You mention it with your marks on the page. So I'm putting that down right there to make sure I remember that that's what's happening right there. Okay, so the part of this second video, part 2, is finishing up the drawing. Everything here, especially from the first part, and then what I did in between, what I did not film, again, just doing those details. I didn't want to take the time to film for your sake. Everything now is there as far as an outline and a silhouette, right? Okay, so all the details are there, but this is what we need to do. The project requires us to put down shapes, value shapes, with 6 values in our mind. Remember, we thought about that at the very beginning. The specs of the project for this particular project is I have to be putting in 6 values. There's a lot more than 6 in this source, a lot more. So I need to be distilling this down into just 6 values. So I'll be simplifying, not simplifying it so severely to only have 3 values, like some of the sketchbook assignments we have you guys do, but we are doing something that is a lot less than what's actually shown here. So I've got my kneaded eraser, and I'm going to start systematically going through and showing my thought process and what it is that I'm going to be doing with my shapes as I segment this guy down. All right. So a couple of shapes were already in here. During the first part, I was showing in the source, we have this nice shape of highlight right there. Remember from the first part, that first video, I mentioned it's important to understand what's going on. Just like with the waffle cone, it was important to understand, why does something not match up? Ask yourself, why is there an inconsistency, or why does something look different than expected? There's always a reason, so then discover what that reason is, and then with that understanding, you can then have a better drawing, a better structured drawing because of that. This right here, we had established that is a marking. It's actually the marbled, maybe chocolate part of the ice cream. And whether you want to use that as a shadow, because it does kind of look like it could be a change of plane as well, I'm still just going to put that in there. Okay, so I've got that. Remember, we're simplifying, and we can have a shape language if we want to, but just for sake of, being straightforward, I'm going to just start putting in my shapes. Now, those are the shapes that I've carried over from the first initial drawing. The big thing we want to remember is light side, shadow side. So understand what's going on right here. We have a sphere right here with light side. Where's the light hitting? It's hitting from the right-hand side. So this is where the light is hitting. So this is the shadow side. Right here, light side, shadow side. Because of a change of plane we have here, we do have a sphere right here. But right here we have a plane that goes laterally. But then as the plane changes, light is hitting here. So that's why we've got a highlight right there. These are the value shapes we need to be putting in. So I'm going to use this as my help right there. Okay, so this guy, remember we can have 6 values. So think about it this way. You can have 3 in the light side and then 3 in the shadow side. So as I segment, I'm going to go from big and then go small. So the big thing is light side, shadow side. So in this shape right here, we've got, it looks like we got a nice shadow right there. Okay, and that's this guy, if I wanted to outline him right there. Okay, then we have another shape. Looks like he will transverse into this bottom part, kind of like this. Wraps around. We've got some nice rim lighting that carries itself all the way down. Okay, so that's my rim lighting that I've got. I followed him down, hooked up there, hooked up there. So that's my shape right there. So let me look at some of these other shapes here. So if that's my light side, this is still light. The overall sense of the ice cream is a light value. It's like vanilla ice cream, and vanilla inherently being white is going to have light values in there. So even the shadow side, like notice this shadow side, the darkest part of the ice cream, because the ice cream itself, the actual local color is white. So the darkest part of the ice cream, the shadow side of the ice cream, is not even as dark as what the shadow side of the cone is going to be. So keep that in mind as well. I might have, for my shadow side of the ice cream, I might just be working with these values right here, the midtones. Value is relative, so you have to, I'm now over here, I'm looking at this part right here. I just figured I would start doing that because I was talking about the shadow side of my ice cream. I'm noticing some slight variations here. This is an area I remember I got creative with because those 2 little drips kind of looked funky and kind of strange. So I'm just gonna, maybe I'll just have that be a shadow right there. Like that, okay? Now, the big thing with these shapes is they have to be enclosed. You can't just, have something that's open. Oh, I drew that off screen, sorry. You can't just have something that's open. You have to close it in some way, all right? All of these edges that we're gonna render with the pencils, all of the edges are gonna be hard edges. So this is gonna end up looking kind of like a graphic poster, but rendered in pencil, and you're gonna design your shapes by hand. So because of that, you need to make sure that your shapes are crisp and clean and closed. I can't remember where to go. Here we go. I erased something and then I forgot what was there. There we go. Okay. I reestablished that drawing part. Okay. And this part of the ice cream actually comes down this, kind of separates it. There are some areas of my shapes that look ambiguous, like I'm not quite sure. Like in the drawing process, it made sense to put a mark there, but now that I need to make all of these shapes crisp and clean and closed, I'm gonna clean this up and make them actually look like they are crisp and clean and closed. You can think of it this way. We are like creating our own color by number. And what will end up being in these shapes, instead of colors, will be different values. All right, so let me clean that up. Okay, so this area, remember, this is one whole big sphere. We've got a light side, mid-tone, shadow side. Looks like we can maybe have something like that. Now there's just a little bit of a shadow area right there because this actually has kind of two bumps to it. So if I want to capitalize on that, I might change my silhouette drawing to do this. So that this now is the highlight, so that I'm bringing that down here. This little shape is this guy right here. This guy is this guy right here. I'm visualizing placement. I'm seeing where and how close it is to something else. So I'm not measuring. Similar to the other parts of like the first part of the video, or like part one. Some things I measured and other things I did not measure because I didn't need to. I was confident in my abilities to be able to visually see where things should go. You always need to be comparing though. Always make it accurate, but it doesn't have to be precisely the same as the source. But it does need to be believable, and that accuracy is what keeps it believable. I'm not worried right now about counting how many values I'm going to have going on here. I can always add or subtract shapes as needed. I just need to have some shapes. I need to start systematically going through and adding shapes to start segmenting the light side, shadow side. This little divot in here, it does have a dramatic light side, shadow side. It is causing a form change in the sphere at large, but I'm going to omit it. If I were to omit that little spot right there, it's not going to do anything in a bad way to the overall structure of my ice cream sphere right there. So I'm going to just omit it and not even worry about that guy. All right, so let's see here. We've got this whole area. Looks like it's a sort of light side. I'm trying to see where it could, I could probably bring that up from here. So this is what I'm choosing to do. I've got my highlight right here. Knowing that this is a sphere, this is the direct light side. So I just kind of followed the actual naturalness of the ice cream right there. I stopped right there because this could be like a gray right there. So with this, let's see, I might, I'm trying to think of where I could put that gray. Because I am simplifying this, I can only use so many values, and I'm trying to see where the grays, squinting helps, As I squint, I'm seeing that this area is kind of a triangle right there, so I'm gonna actually modify this shape that I just drew to help me out and get that triangle in there. Remember, I'm omitting that dark little divot that would be right there. I don't need him. Now it looks like this can kind of curve out. Looks like it can combine with these grays right here. I'm looking at, okay, so remember this is all gray, light gray. Sometimes shading it in helps to mentally see what's going on. This would be very light. This would be another kind of gray, but a very light gray. Okay, so maybe this guy comes up. I sometimes have to use my finger to follow along on the source. Okay, we're now starting to get influence from this sphere over here, this other little bubble right there. So it looks like this area is a shadow. And let me actually creep that shadow up around into here and creep that guy up. And that might be just what we do right there. Highlight, light gray, this is light gray. Now actually this is the same gray. That's gonna actually combine right there. So maybe I'll just combine those shapes. Oh, that works well. This is where simplifying comes into place, where two things that are very similar, can you combine them and make them work together? Yes. So remember, this is super light. This is super light. I'm slightly shading in what would be a light gray. Still in the light side, it'd be maybe like this. So if my white is a number 1, I can start filling that in, 1, 1. But then my number 2, which is the very next step, would be about there. Okay, now this is all one shape, but I just put the number twice so that I can visually see that it's gonna be connected all the way into there. For the project, as you read what the specs are, since it needs to be in 6 values, it would be helpful to start numbering your shapes, especially when you know exactly what's gonna be the white of the page. The white of the page is gonna be your number 1. The very next lightness will be number 2. So if I already know that that's my plan, then I can go ahead and start putting that in there. All right, let's see here. As we come further down, we're starting to get into some shadow areas. So I'm not convinced I want my 2 to come all the way down. It looks like I could bring, could maybe bring this up. Maybe I actually, because this area seems a little bit darker. Maybe this is what I do. So that this can be maybe a 3. This is a little bit darker. And the 3 can be right there because this is dark. This is lighter. But this though, I'm seeing, okay, what's happening here? I omitted this from before, but we do still have this highlight region. So it looks like I might need to add the highlight here, just like that. So this would be a 1. This then, this looks like that would be a good 2. It's pretty comparable. Note, ask yourself if the numbers look like they would be the same. Like, would this value be the same as this value? You could argue, yes, this value has a lot of different variations of small detail values in there. But if you squint, they're pretty much the same. Remember, we're still dealing in all light values. So it's not like we're deviating that much from, you know, from anything that's gonna be like super dark or something like that. This highlight, in order to separate these two 2s, I'm gonna take the 1 and actually bring him up like that. I'm gonna hook him around, okay? This could be a 2, this could be a 1. All right. I'm not gonna deal with these super dark shadows right here. I know it's gonna be in the dark region. I just am not gonna assign a number to it yet. 3 is basically a mid-tone. It's a lighter mid-tone. So it's in here. So it looks like the darkest I would go maybe with my ice cream, like way back here, would be 4. So a 3 is getting close to it. So like over here, this is probably a 3, everything there. This then would be a 4. This would probably be maybe a 2. And then a 3. Oh, but then those 3s are going to combine. So I think it might actually be best if I keep this a 3 and this is a 4, and those 4s will combine, and that's fine. Boop, boop. Okay. This area right here is a little bit lighter. It's getting more of that light from the underside, or like around the ice cream. That looks like that could be a 2. And then this could maybe be a 3 or a 4. I'll currently put it down as a 3. Because if I put it as a 4, it's going to combine with that 4. So we'll just do that. Okay. Down here, again, still dark. We're dealing with 3s and 4s probably. And it looks like maybe I can just combine those two. Let's just do that. And this will be a 3. And this is what I'll do here. With this being a 4, and with this also, I'm going to make this a 4. I can do that to separate them just a little bit. This is why your crisp closed shapes are necessary. All right, so that's 1. This is a shape. Make sure every shape is accounted for. This dark area right here, is he comparable to the 4? I think he could be another 4. So we'll do that. So this dark shape right here, which is actual coloring of the ice cream, it'll be a 4. Okay. What's right next to the 4 right here? It's that little dark area, the little dark underhook. That looks like that could just be another 3 as I look how closely it is. So maybe I just combine those things. So if that's a 3, I could, if I wanted to, maybe I have a little bit of a 2 that hooks under there. I'm going to make that number clearer. Here we go. Okay. Remember, this is a 1. This then would probably be a 2 or a 3. I'm going to say it should be a 3 because it's stemming off of the 4. I'm just going to make them closer in value like that. Okay, but this is another 1. Remember, they combine. And then this guy, he could be a 2, I would say, because remember, we're rolling back. So if we have a sphere, everything in here is going to be maybe 1s and 2s, and everything here is going to be 2s and 3s with maybe the occasional spot of 1. But then as we continue moving farther back, this would then be 3s and 4s with maybe the occasional spot of 2s. So as we continue to roll back in space, we're getting darker and darker, and then only a few spots maybe could be reserved for something residual from that next step up. So we're thinking about that in the same way with our ice cream. We've got 1s and 2s right here, with the exceptional 3 and 4 just because of that marking that we see right there. But then the further we get back here, we're only focusing mostly on 3s and 4s. So do you see how there's a pattern happening with where we're at with the light side, shadow side here? All right, so as we continue moving forward, we've got the 3 here. Everything up here now is accounted for. Remember, I'm shape designing and I'm thinking about form, and I'm using the source to help me find the form shapes. And I'm simplifying this down to just large masses of values that can work together and merge together. So I'm slowly numbering as I go. I can refine shapes a little bit better later if I need to for the, like, what kind of curvy or straight edge shapes that I need. All right, so if this is a 3, I like how the 3 hooks up under here. And we have a lot of messiness happening here. I remember I was simplifying this a little bit. And I remember in the other video, this is actually the ice cream that is sitting inside this, this cone right here. So what I'm gonna do is this is going to be an area of my ice cream that is actually sitting inside. So this is going to be a shadow. I have shape designed this guy, basically is what I've done. And I've given him more of an accentuation because I want clarity for my viewer. It took me a little bit to understand that this area right here was the ice cream sitting inside the inner edge of the waffle cone. So if I know that now as the designer, I'm going to design mine to look a little bit more specifically inset with a shadow right there. So that might be a 4 or a 5. I might make that a 5 just to make it really dark. I want it to give contrast. Darkest darks are going to be your 6, right? So something that's like super dark, like that area, that would be a 6. It's always helpful to establish your darkest dark. Okay, which means these guys are probably 5s or 6s. These shapes right here. Don't really want that 2 hooking underneath. I don't think that would make sense. So I'm going to make that 1. Just do that. Okay. This I'm just going to say is a 5. This will be a 5. And then maybe these 2, because they're specifically the ice cream resting within the voluminous cone. I'm going to make that a 6. I'm going to make that dramatically different right there. Okay, so I've got my 5s, got 6. Okay, so this shape right here, it looks like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually merge this. Notice how he could maybe seamlessly merge into this whole area if I took away all of that ragged edgeness. So I'm going to modify my drawing to do a merging. This is what I'm going to do. This 1 that I have here, I'm just going to bring it all the way down. So this whoop is what I'm going to do. Because notice that we have a nice rim light of 1 right there. When I say 1, I mean the value. I'm using my white as the value 1, the number 1. So then that means my 2, maybe my 3 just stops there. My 2 comes down there. So that right beyond the 5, I have maybe this is, let's see, a 2 comes down here, 5. Here we go. This is what we'll do. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we've got a nice gradient happening. Darkest dark, getting slightly lighter until we get the nice 2 that merges up here. And then we've got that beautiful rim light of a 1 as it hooks up around. So that simplification has now been solved right there. And that looks really nice and clean. All right, so moving down here, I'll just focus on the actual ice cream just so the video isn't super long and it's not a time lapse. So I'm going to just focus on the ice cream. And then after I focus on shape designing and doing the numbers for the ice cream, on my own, not recording myself, I will do the rest of the cone, at least in the sense of the details. And then I'll be able to talk through in part 3 what I did for the cone as I segment, remember, light side, shadow side. With the cone, if I were to just take a moment to talk about it with the source, light side, mid-tone, shadow side. So all of the values back here in the shadow side are probably going to be 6, 5s, and 4s. Everything here in the mid-tone is going to be maybe 4s with the occasional 5, 4s and 3s. And then everything up here is going to be 1s, 2s, and 3s, with the occasional 4 or 5 for some of these really deep shadows that are necessary. The same concept applies to the hands. Notice those big sections of value. And if it's a mid-tone, it's going to be probably a value 3 or 4, maybe with the occasional 5 or the occasional 2. And then you have the light side area, which is going to be mostly 1s and 2s with maybe 3s. With the super thin little cut-ins to the nails, that might be a 4 or a 5, right? So anything that is exceptional like that, there's always a reason why you would put a very dark value into the light area. And so having a specific cut in or a specific change in the form, which would be the nail bed, you know, like digging into the finger there, that would be the good reason to have that and why it's necessary. But then when you notice something that is a mid-tone or a shadow area, don't be putting any 1s or 2s in there. They don't belong there. Everything needs to be cohesive with the band that they belong to with the form principle. So that's my little TED talk about keeping the form principle cohesive. Let's follow this along, continuing. All right, so I've got my 6 right there. I guess what I can do extended from the 6 is maybe a 5. I have a little line following that because it's pretty thin. All right. Let's see, this area right here, this would probably be a 6, this shape. Looking at how it relates to this drip. This shadow right here, I'm not quite sure what value that'll be. Right now, it will probably be like a mid-tone dark value, so maybe a 3 or a 4. I'm leaning more towards 4. I might just do that. Okay, this area, that might be a 2. Which means this would be maybe so that I might have a 3 that actually travels very far. It might be a nice characteristic shape that travels very far with just some pieces of light shapes that kind of float within it. So for example, like right here, by the way, whenever you see a dark, look right next to it. There's probably a light right next to it. I've just found one in this case right next. So this is my 6 shape. Right there, right below it is a very light, meaning a light value. Right here. I'm just going to bring it down, combine it. Right there. Trying to see where I should place it. All right, so this shadow right here is because of this drip. I've got a shadow from this drip, so I want to make sure that that holds true. I'm going to reinstate this drip. Okay. This drip does have a marking. That's part of the marbling marking. So I can omit that later, but currently I'm going to put it in there. I would make that a 6. So for this shadow, I'm actually going to just follow the contour right there. So this then would be like a 4 or a 5. I'm going to purposefully make it a 5. Just because I'm going to make this a shadow to allow this drip to come out at us in space. And so when something comes out at us, it has a shadow. So I'm going to just make that more dramatic than maybe what it actually is. Remember, we're still simplifying. So there's still choices we need to make. So that means on this side right here, I'm going to redesign this shape to be something more like this. Just smoother, more flowy. And I'm gonna have that play with the curvature of the 2 I've got right here. I'm just gonna have that kind of flow together. I'm gonna see if that makes sense. Part of me wants to take this and connect it here. So I might do this. This might actually, I I actually like that hooking up under there. Okay. Remember, drawing is a form of thinking. So as you're doing this, think it through and mentally think of maybe some different variations. So this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take this guy. Okay, so he's hooking under. It's this shadow. The shadow is being hooked under right there. Just like that. But that's pretty dark. So I feel like this should actually be, maybe I'll just make that a 4 because we're still in light values. This guy then I might make a little bit lighter. I might just choose, let's see, how do I want this? If this is 6, and then we've got, let's see, 4, and the 6 is there because of marking, because of a marking in the ice cream, not because of the shadow. So this then might be, is lighter. I wonder if that could be a 3 then. And if the other side, this is 2, and then we're gonna have a 1 as the nice highlight. I'm switching what I was going to do with this. I wanted that to be a cast shadow with a 5. I'm switching that to be a 3 to actually be a little bit more closer to what that is. And that way I'll be able to put a darker shadow to hook underneath this little drip right there. It's just kind of a nice little nodule to showcase a drip. So then that means this could be a 2. So 2, 4, 2. We're gonna have a nice little form change that happens there. So 2, 4, 2, 4, because that's a 4 right there. That's gonna be a nice thin strip of value right down there. All right, so the 3 comes up and curves around. We have a really long 3 value happening. But now we're getting into these areas right here, and I'm almost done. Some places take longer to think through than others to actually get them the way that you want them to be. Remember, this is a 1. The one side, like the immediate one side of one value is another value. So this is a 1. This then is my 3, because it just continues. It's just one big long shape right there. That's a 1. It's my 6. And so this 3 comes in down into here. I could, if I wanted to, I could actually make this be maybe a 4 to be just slightly darker right there. This 3 though continues, and this area, remember this area got confusing, but if I squint, I can just segment that into light side, shadow side. So this could still work just how it is. Remember, this is going to be a 1 because it's that nice rim light. But this area, maybe this could be a nice 4. So I'm wondering if maybe what I could do is I could take this 4 and I can extend that shape to be all part of something that's in here. And currently, I'm not really focusing, I'm not getting distracted by all the detail that is in here. I'm going to just follow what I naturally have as far as shapes go in this area. So this is now all of 4. This is still part of my 3, just follow that along. That looks like that could be a really good 3. Now, we've got a 3 here, and we've got a 2 right here. So should they combine or should they be separate? It looks like I could maybe make that 2, come down and do this. So we're gonna have a 1, a 2, 3, so that'll be a really nice transition. When you have numbers that are in line like that, you're gonna have a nice gradient. If you have a 1 next to a 2, next to a 3, this is light, a little bit darker, this is even darker. We have a nice transitional gradient when you start doing that. It gives it, without soft edges, this is what gives the feel of a gradiating turn, a transitional turn. All right, so that looks pretty good. There's a couple of shapes down here I have not assigned numbers to or values to, but everything else is looking really nice. I'm keeping the 1s and 2s and 3s where they need to in the lights and the slight midtones. When there's shadows, so that would be like a specific punch into the form. That's where we would have our exceptional darks in there. But the further we rotate in space around that sphere into the shadow side, which is here on the left, we're starting to find more 4s and 3s. Remember, I'm not getting a ton of 5s and 6s here just because the actual local value of the ice cream itself is light. It's like a vanilla white type of cream color. So let me move on. I'm going to finish this real fast. Remember, this is another 4. This guy right down here. So if this 3 continues, I think we can have a nice thin shape right there of something that's light. And that could be a 2. So this is a 3. Remember, the 3 travels. The 3 won't stop until I do something to stop it. So I feel like this area, though, you know, if this is my 4, if this is a 4, that might change to be a 5, depending on how dark I want that to be, because it is a marking. Like this guy, he's a marking and he's a 6. So maybe he, just because he's a marking and he is rather dark, let's make him a 5. So then that means he will be a 5 down here. Okay. Which means if this is a 3, I can maybe stop the 3 right there. And then this would be a 4. And what's right up here. Again, this is part of, notice how the curvature is happening with the ice cream spilling over the edge of the waffle cone edge right there. So I'm going to actually make this a 6. Because it's a shadow right underneath this little area. Notice this reflected light right there. That could be really nice to put in. I don't know if I should keep it, but it might be nice to just have a 2 be some reflected light right down there, right next to the 6. We'll see how that looks a little bit later. I'm systematically making sure all of my shapes right now have values assigned to them, and they look pretty good.